If you're a business coach or consultant, you should have a look at this video. How much are you making at the present time? Are you interested in increasing that significantly? As an investment banker, still being a business consultant, doing what you're currently doing, you could substantially increase your income by probably 3 or 4 times, and even a lot more. Instead of selling your time by the hour, you could get paid what you're worth. How would you feel about partnering with a Hong Kong investment bank, which is now setting up in the US? As a business consultant director, you can look at making $1.6 million this year, that is in the next 12 months, and each year for the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how long you wish to stay with the investment bank. If you're interested, you need to see whether you have the aptitude. There's a few questions that you'll need to be able to answer at the time of your interview, and this is a forerunner of the sort of things that you'll be asked about. It's a case study, a real-life example of a business coach. A business coach is earning, after tax, $200,000. Does that sound like you? The first question is, how much does that business coach make as reportable income before tax? Now, there's no correct answer. Tax scales change, there's state taxes as well as federal taxes, and there's deductions. The purpose of the exercise is to see your reasoning, to see what your mental skill is with arithmetic, and to see what business recommendations you can come up with for clients in particular circumstances. It's better. Pre-tax is going to be about $300,000. Now, we're not accountants, we're economists. We're actually a different type of animal, and what we want to determine is, will the piano actually fit through the doorway? We don't need the actual precise amount, but near enough is good enough when we're making estimates. Now let's take the average business coach or consultant. Their overheads are actually quite low, probably around about 5% of their revenue. They don't need expensive offices, they can actually have a virtual office, and the expenses there could be in the order of $20,000 a year. Obviously they're going to need a car or some form of transport, so let's allow for $20,000 going for transport, and obviously you need to have a good time, and let's allow for $10,000 going to entertainment. And your accountant will be able to make sure that those expenses are actually deductible allowances. What is the total figure then for those business overheads? If you didn't get the $50,000, then you've missed the answer by far, and don't bother applying. Now let's have a look at the marketing budget. There's $70,000 that the business coach is spending, essentially on advertising and other marketing. The number of customers that produces on an annual basis is 21. The total revenue for the business coach before tax and before expenses is $420,000. What is the average fee per client per year? Okay, it's $20,000 per year. It wasn't a trick question, but it's not important if you actually miss that. You shouldn't need a calculator for these sorts of exercises, and when dealing with most of our clients, you won't need a calculator either. But what is the effectiveness of the marketing program? There's $70,000 that's spent on marketing, and it produces revenue of $420,000. Can you work out that you spend $1 and you get $6? There's a multiple of 6 times what you spend. Now, what's the hourly rate for the business consultant who spends 2 hours a week on each client? There's 21 clients, and at 2 hours each, work out how many hours you're spending, and then have a look at how many dollars you're getting. What is your hourly billing rate? You need to be able to work that out. Yes, you can use your pen and paper, or pencil and paper. Now, the foregoing scenario just sets the scene for you as a business consultant, providing advice essentially to other business consultants, business owners, business coaches, and essentially service providers. Now, in dealing with money, you must appreciate that numbers come into play. If you're hopeless with numbers, then you're certainly not going to be able to provide any financial input for the client, in which case we thank you but no thanks. Now it's time to put on your thinking cap. As a business consultant, what is the first recommendation that you're going to make to this business coach? You can think about it for a while. You can pause the video if you like. We just want to know, what's the first recommendation that you're going to make to this client? If you did not say prepare a business plan or show us your business plan and let's go to work on your business plan, why not? Now, what's the maximum workload that you could expect from a business consultant or a business coach? With 21 clients and you're spending 2 hours a week on each one, how many hours is that? How many hours a week are you working with your clients at the present time? And how many hours are you spending on attending to your own business, dealing with the day-to-day and the planning and the management? And how many additional hours, how many spare hours do you have that you could use to see more clients? So what's your second recommendation? Assuming that the client has the goal of making more money, what do you recommend? You also have to explain why you're making that recommendation. So at the interview, that's more important than the actual recommendation. We want to know why you're making a particular recommendation. Now, we specialise in the financial management of our clients because that's an area in which our clients are deficient. Most business owners are not terribly competent in managing money, and the internet gurus do not have a clue about the financial side and therefore can not offer assistance to any of their throng in terms of finance, investment or tax. We integrate the financial management side of business with marketing because it is the marketing that produces the money. The financial management only improves the efficiency of it. Now let's have a look at the resources that are available to this client. Remember, the client earned after tax $200,000? Well, let's have a look at the resources that are now available to us and to the client to make more money. Now there's a few assumptions that we're going to make as to what they are spending from the $200,000 of after-tax earnings. The $200,000 comes in, but let's assume the personal expenses are in the order of $130,000. How much is left over? How much cash is still rattling around there for the client to use? We'll call that discretionary income because they have a choice as to what they do with that money. And they're going to be looking to you for a recommendation as to what should be done with that $70,000. Now, what's the lifeblood of a business? It's liquidity. And that is, if the business runs out of cash, so they can't meet their wages, their overheads, their marketing budget, what's going to happen to their clients, their client generation? They are not being able to advertise and market to produce more sales and more customers. They're going to wither. So it's important to maintain liquidity. At the end of the year, there's $70,000 worth of cash, and it needs to be available, although not necessarily used. It is there as a backstop in case the business has a few hiccups. So what do you recommend to the client to do with that $70,000 and why? Now, in looking at the resources, the question before, did you omit something? Did you leave out the $100,000 of tax? That tax is not payable immediately. There's provision for tax of $100,000 based on the pre-tax earnings of $300,000, but it's still there sitting in the client's bank account or in their till or in their pocket, and it's available to be used. So if you don't use it, what's going to happen to it? It'll sink to the bottom of the ocean and be gone forever. But it can be used in the business until the taxman taps on the window and says it's time to pay up. So let's have a look at what is the benefit of those dollars. Not just the $100,000 in tax that you can save, but what can that $100,000 actually produce by spending it on something worthwhile? The question is, where do you spend it? If you do nothing, it's just going to evaporate. If you do something, what's going to happen to it? It depends where you spend it. So what's your recommendation to the client in respect of the $100,000 of tax savings and also the $70,000 of liquidity? And how are your objectives going to be accomplished? How are you going to spend that money? Where, when, and how? Now, what is your strategy and what are your tactics? And given that you have a particular set of recommendations, what's the likelihood of your recommendations turning out to be successful for your client? What's the degree of certainty that these recommendations will produce the goods? Now, in business, particularly in investment and finance, you need to do an analysis of what happens when you spend X amount of dollars in Y areas over N amount of time. And there are a particular formula and particular procedures involved, such as Bayesian analysis and Markov chains. Now, I don't expect you to understand or know or have heard of these things before, but remember how the internet gurus brag about not having a formal education, not having a university degree, being college dropouts? Well, they don't have a clue about financial decision making, and they too have never heard of Bayesian analysis or Markov chains. So where are your gurus at? What does your guru know about decision making? With Bayesian analysis, you'll actually you can Google this and look it up for your interest, and we may even ask you to explain it. So I won't go into more details now. I was about to, but I'll withhold that for the time being. Now, what does your guru know about expected probabilities? This is sort of a hint leading in the direction, right? In the decision making, it's a matter of you go where the higher probabilities are, you work out what the expectations are going to be. You need to have some understanding of economics. This is not just supply and demand, it also includes things such as pricing and costs. And you need to have some familiarity with tax. When you earn $1, how much of that dollar do you keep? In the example that we're using in our case study, of the $300,000, $100,000 of it is going to go out the window. And then when you have money and you invest it, where are you going to invest it, and what sort of returns are you going to get? What are the expected returns? What is the risk, and what's the probability of having a payoff? Now, there's also simple things that the guru may actually be good at, like washing their dog. But if they're good at that, does that qualify them to be your financial consultant or to be your business management advisor? Now, there's some decision options that your client has to make, and you're there as their business consultant to guide them, to help them, and to make recommendations. So the first thing you could be doing, this is sort of the accountant's approach and the lawyer's approach, they recommend doing nothing, because by doing nothing, the advisor doesn't get into possible hot water if things happen to go wrong. Now, if something goes wrong, who's to blame? Well, they look at the accountant, they look at the lawyer, they look at the business consultant. So the safest thing to do for your client, well actually it's not for your client, the safest thing to do for yourself is to recommend do nothing, and then you can't be blamed if something goes wrong. Right? So hold on to the $70,000 to meet next year's marketing costs, and throw away the 100 grand in tax, because as you do nothing, the 100 grand is gone. You could spend the $70,000 on a wild time. Live it up, right? At least you're going to enjoy it, or at least to go out with the client so the two of you can enjoy spending the money together. It's not going to produce anything for the business, but it actually might, make you feel good for a brief time until you get the hangover. You could invest it. Where are you going to invest it? Are you licensed as an investment advisor? And if what you're going to do is to put it in things like stocks and shares or into property, it's certainly not going to give you the same sort of result that you could have as if the client invests that money into their business. Investing into a business is the best investment that you could make these days. Firstly, because of the tax advantage. Every dollar you invest actually costs you only 60 cents, so you can get an immediate return, and the investor, the client, the business owner, has control of what's going on. You could use it to pay off your home mortgage. Now, that's not much of an investment. If your mortgage rates are low, if your mortgage rates are 4% and you were getting a tax deduction, you're going to get a 3% return on that money. You think you could do better putting that money to work in the business? Certainly you should. Okay, let's plough all of that money now into prepaying your marketing expenses for next year. By prepaying, you establish a tax advantage. It's all deductible in this year, and you have the money well spent. Now, instead of spending the 70 grand or the 100 grand, let's spend the whole $200,000 of retained earnings on marketing. What sort of result is that going to produce? Well, remember the marketing multiple? It was 6 times. What would happen if we spent the $300,000 on marketing? Not just the $200,000, but the $300,000. Now, we could even spend more, and you need to have answers as to why. And you need to evaluate the effectiveness of your recommendation. You do that before the money is spent, not after the money is spent. And what's the rationale? Well, when you sit in the middle of the road and a Mack truck is bearing down on you, what happens if you don't move? This is exactly what happens with respect to tax. Tax is like a bundle of money sitting there in the middle of the road with you hanging onto it, and if you spend the whole lot, so it gets out of the road on marketing, the Mack truck comes along, you're not going to feel a thing. You can eliminate all reportable income for this current year, and you're actually pushing income into next year. You're saving the $100,000, but it should not just be the tax that you're looking at. You actually can make things with that money. So instead of focusing on the tax, focus on what it could produce when you spend it. In the scheme of things, what's going to be more significant, the $100,000 that you're going to save, or what it could result in as a result of your recommendation? Now, the returns are going to be magnified. Now, we apply the same capital efficiency as what the client's getting at present in their marketing. That is the $100,000 that is sort of sitting there can be spent and produce 6 times the figure in revenue. So there's $600,000 there that $100,000 could turn into. Not a bad result. And it's just coming from the tax savings. What is going to happen though if we're going to spend more than just the $100,000? If we're going to spend the $200,000 or the $300,000 on marketing? What are you going to produce in revenue if you spend the $300,000 on marketing? Initially, you're going to zero your tax, so you've got $100,000 profit straight up. The next thing though is you're going to get a multiple of 6 times the $300,000. So what's that going to produce in terms of extra revenue? Did you say 1.9 million? Well, Max, you missed it by that much, but you got close, didn't you? So what's your fourth recommendation? With an additional 1.8 million, not 1.9 million of revenue in next year, you could actually pay a lot more tax. 40% of the 1.8, you work it out, it's $720,000 that you're going to throw away. Is that your recommendation to the client? If you like paying tax? Well, let's say you really like paying tax and your client likes paying tax. Instead of paying a little amount of tax, how about paying even more tax? And you can pay even more tax if you actually spend the entire $1.8 million. Because what's going to happen? That $1.8 million, if you're spending it in marketing, is going to have a multiplier effect. And it will generate around $10.8 million in revenue. And then you could pay tax on the $10.8 million. It's going to be just over $4 million in tax that you'll be paying. Should make your client feel good, certainly will make the IRS feel good, won't it? Now, I know I'm being facetious, but if you're slow, maybe the penny hasn't dropped just yet. You can keep doing this. You can keep repeating the process. So instead of paying tax on the $10.8 million, you could actually spend that on marketing and you're going to get a multiplier, a multiple of 6 times in revenue. Can you multiply 10.8 by 6? That's how much revenue you can produce. Now, at this stage, you've probably gone outside, or you're going to turn the video off, because these numbers are astronomical. These numbers are far larger than what the average person or average business consultant has ever come across. But these are very small figures for investment banks, because investment banks, they don't deal with the millions, they deal with the billions. Now, you can be a partner of a new investment bank in the US, and the bank will be looking at making billions while you make the millions. But if you're frightened of dealing with and thinking about big dollars, then obviously this business is not for you, and basically you shouldn't be a business coach, you shouldn't be a business consultant. You should go and mow lawns, because there the dollars are much smaller. This process, by repeating it over and over again, gives exponential compounding. And this is the old sort of trick. If you got a grain of corn, you put it on one square on a chessboard, and then it doubled, and it doubled, and it doubled. How much corn would you end up with? Or alternatively, just put 1 cent on the chessboard. So break out your chessboard, get a pile of coins, and put 1 cent on the first coin, on the first square, and then put 2 cents on the second square, and so on. And then when you get to the interview, you can tell us how much money is actually on that chessboard. Now, you can keep this compounding process going indefinitely. You don't actually have to wait for, or you don't have to stop when the 64 squares on the chessboard are actually covered. You can keep going and going and going until you decide to stop the music, not when someone else decides to stop playing the flute. Now, you can keep compounding your pre-tax earnings until you feel you've got enough money there to cover the US deficit. You can then write a cheque to Uncle Sam, or better still, you can give it to your family and your friends, or you can give it to orphans, you can give it to charities, you can give it to whoever needs it the most. And the decision as to who gets it can be yours, not the government's. Now let's have a look at the business rewards. Your business and your client's business can produce an enormous amount of money for yourself and for others. You can decide where the money goes, when the money goes, how much is spent, and how much you keep, and who you'd like to help. Now, as a business consultant for an innovative investment bank, you're going to earn more money than what you've ever dreamt of, and you can help more people than what you are currently able to do. All you need to do is apply now. You can do that by clicking the link at the bottom of the page here, or at the top of the page here, and join us. Obviously, you need to have an appointment. We need to have a discussion to see whether or not you're a good fit. But if you've spent the time to go to the end of this video, there's a pretty good chance that you are. So, thank you for taking the time to watch the video. Apply now. Just click the link.